Alex Blume, thank you for showing up. You're with 2 Prime, man. We're gonna have to.
Every time I hear 2 Prime, I imagine 2 Chainz saying it. 2 Prime. Like that's got to be like y'all's jingle.
that it's on their website. That's like when you click on
That's
it.
that's where it comes
Right.
from.
Okay, got it.
But yeah, man.
It's a very rap heavy start to the
Yeah,
business.
they're in Miami's, right? You guys
Oh,
are in
okay.
Miami, so like, isn't that? It's kind of yeah. They got that little.
We're all over. I'm in Colorado, but Adam's in Miami. So
Oh, so you guys are in like the complete opposite type of areas, like completely. Colorado and Miami are not similar in any way, shape, or form that I've seen.
Yeah,
No.
not as many Spanish speakers in the mountains of Colorado.
Right, yeah. But yeah, so I'm anxious to talk to you guys because I don't think a lot of people know what goes on kind of in your world, especially people that probably listen to our show. So it'll be interesting for them to learn about y'all and kind of your side of the business and what you guys do. And also, I've had more calls over the last few years from folks that would probably be in your area. So I kind of want to hear more about it as well and learn for myself. So thanks for coming though, dude.
Yeah, I feel like people on the finance side of stuff, it's just kind of like we're lurking in the shadows and people aren't as aware. And I think especially as it pertains to Bitcoin mining, a lot of stuff has been changing and evolving pretty quickly. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to, I can tell you whatever I know, I can tell you.
Well, why don't we just start with like yourself, obviously, your background, and then kind of dive into 2 Prime and what you guys do, because yeah, this is all going to be foreign to a lot of people.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of have a eclectic background, but after college, I was in the Peace Corps in Panama and lived where there was no phone or internet service, and for 2 years with like an indigenous tribe in the jungle.
What?
And then after I got back in like 2011,
Wait, you can't just
2012,
Yeah,
breeze through
dude.
that.
Time
Pause.
out. Rewind.
You can't.
You gotta
Indigenous.
expand.
What part of the world was this in?
it was in Panama, pretty close to the border with Costa Rica on the the Caribbean side of the country.
There's indigenous tribes there.
That's what I had no idea. I had no idea.
Yeah, I think there's like 5 or 6 different tribes. I was living with one called the Nobe tribe, which they have reservations similar to how we have in the United States. That's dedicated land, but like I was living with no electricity, no phone service for about 2 years in a wooden like stilt hut with leaves on as a roof.
What did you do?
and
Yeah,
helping
what were you doing?
Mostly reading, but I spent a lot of, I mean, my project there is I was working with these indigenous women that made these artisan crafts like out of bags or out of plants. They made these cool bags. And I just helped them to kind of organize as a business and sell those to gift shops around the country, basically.
What did they speak? What language? Was it Spanish?
They have their own indigenous language called Nobere. And then, so the older people only spoke that. And then the younger people spoke Spanish.
So I'm assuming you speak Spanish, but how would you communicate with a lot of these people?
Yeah, I speak Spanish. And then, I mean, after like a year of living there, I had learned the basics of their indigenous language also. And then there was actually this nonprofit medical organization that I would go and like translate for them a little bit, but I didn't have I wasn't fluent or anything, but I could say enough basic words better than any other white guy who spoke English also. So they used me to translate.
Cool.
I'm gonna switch 1 second. It's super laggy. I'm gonna switch the Wi-Fi, so if it drops, we'll pick right back where we left. But it should transfer seamlessly.
Okay.
All right, didn't work. All right, we got you, Taylor or Alex.
Is it better?
Yeah, that's much better. We'll edit this out.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So you did that for 2 years?
Yeah, about 2 years. I lived out there, and yeah, it was just by myself, and it was pretty psychologically challenging, I would say.
Yeah, I bet.
So
That's
is that
incredible.
where you found Lord Satoshi? Is that where you found Bitcoin,
Well,
or was
so
it
after I
much
came
later?
back from the Peace after I came back from the Peace Corps, I was obsessed with like how you could get phone and internet service out to these rural areas where there wasn't really a profitable business model. And so I started a company trying to set up rural cell phone towers. Um, and right around that time in like 2012, like when I left for the Peace Corps, nobody really had a smartphone. And when I got back, everybody had a smartphone. And I was like, man, if you could just get people smartphones and some phone service, you could change their whole lives. And so then we were thinking a lot about what services were possible. And I learned about Ripple at the time, which was a way to send remittances without people that didn't have bank accounts, if they just had a phone and phone service. And at the time, you could send Bitcoin via Ripple. And so I have like emails from 2012, 2013 trying to coordinate with Ripple about how I could set up like this service for people in rural Panama. And from there, it was just, it was like, wow, this is like internet money. This makes a lot of sense. This is going to be a thing. And kind of went from there. And then right when I got back from the Peace Corps, I worked in like a complete opposite kind of job. I worked at Merrill Lynch, and
Yeah,
so I was thinking a lot about money.
you go from working with
thinking about a lot of money.
ladies. You go from working with ladies on trying to help them sell their bags to freaking Merrill Lynch, huh?
Yeah, I woke up in like this leaf roof hut and left that day. And by that night, I was at my like mom's house on a golf course in Scottsdale, like getting ready to start a job in finance. It was
Oh, that's wild.
pretty different.
Yeah, that is wild, man. That's incredible, though. That's stuff I'd like to know. And I can't believe you tried to gloss over that like it was no big deal.
Yeah, just live with indigenous tribes, no big deal.
For 2 years. That's pretty wild. So, okay,
Yeah.
so you went to Merrill Lynch, and yeah, I see how you got your kind of exploratory interest into crypto, but that led to Bitcoin, obviously. And then, so sorry, I keep jumping in there, but go ahead.
So yeah, I was working at Merrill Lynch and trying to start this business setting up rural cell phone towers. And as part of that, I met this venture capital fund called Tomorrow Ventures, which is the VC fund of Eric Schmidt, but like not for Google, but just for Eric Schmidt. And they were interested in Bitcoin mining and some early crypto startups around that time. And so I was like broke, and they just had me kind of do stuff out of pity, but I learned a lot about crypto at the time, and just kind of kept learning stuff from a VC perspective. And then later on, I went and worked at a hedge fund that traded like public equities, trading volatile assets in public equities like the VIX or UVXY, all these volatility products that you could trade derivatives on. But it was always just stayed interested in crypto. And then I moved to, I'm skipping over some stuff, but I moved to New York and started a broker dealer that was raising money for crypto projects. And we were trying to issue security tokens. And so like regulated token offerings, basically. And that was like a complete failure. Nobody wanted to invest in anything. It's just like, if you have say you have like, we worked with one company that was a publicly traded biotech company called Agenus. They still are traded on NASDAQ. And they were selling like a royalty share of their, one of their medicines that was in clinical trials that now I think is an approved medicine that's a profitable drug that they developed. However, it's like, so everyone just thought there was ICOs in like 2017. Everyone's like, oh, if I just create a token, like money's magically going to show up. But as soon as you regulate it, like a biotech investor doesn't want to touch like a digital security. They just want to invest like a regular way. And then crypto people don't want to invest in a biotech company. And so there was just nobody that fit investing into these products. And we worked with a number of good companies, but basically slowly went out of business. And then one of the investors in that company, his name was Mark Fleury, he founded a company called JBoss that was sold to Red Hat for $350 million in 2006. And you probably haven't heard of JBoss, but it was the first like open source software company to ever have a like large scale acquisition event. And so he was one of the last investors into this broker dealer company, a security token company that I lost his money really quickly. And he's like, hey, why don't we try to do something else? And we created 2Prime. Basically, we're just trading our own money for about a year. Around that time, in 2019 is when derivatives products started to emerge for Bitcoin, and then a little bit later ETH. And so we were just early on trading that stuff, and I did pretty well for us. And then we started investing for some of his friends, and then for some companies. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm not good enough at this to be doing this for this many people. And so I hired all the people. I worked at this public equities hedge fund that I mentioned. I hired the chief investment officer and one of the quants from that company. And I was like, hey, you guys should come do this. You guys know what you're doing. And so that was kind of the original genesis of what we do. And so we basically take what we know from trading volatility products in public equities, and then we just do it for crypto, which is, I should say pretty much just Bitcoin. About 70% of what we trade is Bitcoin, and the other 30% is ETH. And so we have been doing that for a number of publicly traded Bitcoin miners, some crypto
Well, I was
OGs,
gonna say,
people,
how do you
founders,
guys
companies. Yeah.
how are you guys interacting with the miners specifically? Like, explain that relationship.
Yeah. So, for the miners, they have an issue because they have regular operational expenses and a very unpredictable commodity that they're producing.
Mhm.
And so we can use derivatives trades to make it either hedge, like basically make it more predictable. We can, if they have an existing base of Bitcoin, a stack, then we can use that to trade. There's only a couple that do, but we work with some of them, and we can trade that stack to produce more Bitcoin through options
Mm.
trading. Or most of them, the primary use case is they want to hedge downside without
Right.
spending money. So you can do things like you could sell a call, and the premium you get paid for the call, you can use to buy a put. And so you can know, okay, it costs us, well, I'm in 15 days or however many days till the halving, everyone's basically making half as much money all of a sudden. And so they know, okay, it's going to cost us $55,000 to produce a Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's trading at 60K, and we're screwed if it goes down much further below 55K, or we're running negative. So we can create trade structures that even if Bitcoin goes down to $5, they have put protection. That means they still have the capital to keep running their business. So there's some trade-offs there, because you're kind of sacrificing some
Upside.
hodl upside, but you have predictability in the business. And if you look at any other energy market, like natural gas or oil, nobody just makes oil and hopes that the price
Right.
stays up. Everyone uses derivatives trading to have predictable cash flow and predictable income for the next 6, 9, 12 months. And it also makes it, like, if you're a public company and you can say that you're doing this kind of stuff, it makes it a lot easier to find financing, get loans. It's attractive to most investors. It's a little bit, a lot of people have been trading Bitcoin mining stocks as a proxy to holding Bitcoin, which has started to change now that the ETFs exist. But nevertheless, people want to invest in businesses they know are not going to go out of business for things that are outside of their control. And so
Yeah.
we just help create greater predictability through derivatives trading, basically.
And
I should say also, we also do Bitcoin secured loans.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well. So back to the kind of the hedging aspect of it, though. That Jake and I talk about that a lot. That's probably
That's one of the first conversations you
Right.
and I ever had at New Wave.
right.
When we
Right.
first met.
Is like trying to find a
Yeah,
way
like,
to
yeah.
lock in, like, protect yourself on the revenue side, right? And that's why, like, when I was talking to a lot of private equity shops, that was always the issue. It was like, well, was there a way to hedge? I wish I knew about you guys back then. We would have probably locked down some money, because that was the biggest issue, was that, you can't predict your returns in this industry a lot. So, yeah, that's you guys need to do more advertising. I guess that's what we're doing right now. But yes, we need to push that more, because that is the biggest obstacle that I see to some non-traditional. Like, there's groups that are going to invest in the Bitcoin economy because that's what they do and that's what they're designed for. But there's other equity groups that are kind of related, and namely the private equity shops in oil and gas, that I think this is such an easy correlation. Like, the mining game is so much like the E&P game, that a lot of those groups would be very interested to get involved, but the aspect of not having a hedge market is just too much for them to warrant pulling the trigger on. So yeah, groups like you guys are very, very vital to me, in my opinion, to getting that outside capital that's kind of sitting on the sidelines right now and looking for other things to invest in rather than just all the traditional stuff they've been in. And this is closely enough related that I think things like this will actually help them get over the hurdle of like, I don't know how to lock in revenues. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a big deal to me.
Yeah, and I think it's inevitable, like that other miners will start to do this more and more. We see the big miners, either some of them have their own desks, like Cipher Mining has their own traders, and a couple have
Mhm.
their own traders, but a lot of them are. I mean, like most of these companies they're like energy people, and they're thinking about how do I reduce my kilowatts per hour from 4 cents to 2 cents. But they're not a lot of them very familiar with derivatives trading, and so there's a lot of education involved, and it's complicated what we do. I mean, it's simple to explain, but to do it well is quite complicated. And the market's always changing, and so there's a great deal of trust required to hire some outside company to be like, oh yeah, like we'll just trust you to not blow up our entire business.
Right.
And so it's a slow moving process for some of the miners, but I think it's inevitable. I mean, the ones that continue to do it are going to outperform those that don't, and it's like a matter of evolution that everyone's going to be doing it
Mhm.
eventually, or I think they're going to have a tough time.
Yeah, I think
Does
so
does
too.
this strategy act as practically like a legit like hedge, or is this strategy slow the bleeding in the event that the bottom falls out of Bitcoin?
So I mean, when you say the strategy, there's a number of different trade structures you can do
Okay.
to kind of produce a hedge. Like in a way, even if you think about it, if you're trading to generate yield on Bitcoin, in a way that's a hedge because you have more Bitcoin, thus more money when things go down. But typically, what people are doing is selling a caller, so like a um, selling short a call, and then you're buying a call further out of the money, and you still have a net credit there, and then you can use that credit to buy a put. And so, when to do that and how to optimize that is complicated, but that's the most common trade that miners are doing currently, the public ones at least. And a question of how much you're hedged, like, is a decision for the miner. So the more of it you sell, you're capping your upside basically, but you're able to buy more puts without
Mhm.
having to have a net debit. And so most of them they're not hedging 100% of their book. They're hedging like 10 or
Mhm.
20% and just kind of dipping their toe in the water.
Is there a kind of a threshold for the size of a miner that would you guys would work with, or is this like
Or makes
some
sense for?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like is it if somebody say they're running a 10 megawatt site or a 5 megawatt site and that's all they got, is this something that they could call you guys about, or is this really kind of restricted to like 20, 30, 40 megawatts up?
Yeah, so it's pretty time intensive. It's not stuff with the hedging for miners. It's not something you can really automate.
Hmm.
It's you have to watch the market, and each client has a different kind of strategy or set of priorities. And so typically we're looking for people that either have $5 million of Bitcoin already or are producing something like 80 to 100 Bitcoin per month.
Okay, yeah. um
And
one thing.
I should say, the other interesting thing we can do for miners is a lot of miners just mine Bitcoin and sell Bitcoin at the money. Whereas if you sell a dated future, like right now, Bitcoin futures in December are trading at 15% above spot prices. And so if you're not in a rush to sell, or you could sell
Mm,
futures kind of in a cascade over the rest of the year, and you can make an extra 15 to 25% in dollar terms
wow,
than if you just sell
That's
at the
huge.
money.
that is huge.
And that's another thing we've been doing for some miners as well, is this more kind of planned selling.
Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, that's great. Um, One thing too I wanted to ask about was with the ETFs, and kind of, I'm seeing different things about the inflows or buys from the ETFs are outstripping like daily production right now, pre-halving by like 8 to 10% or 8 to 10 times. Um,
Yeah.
so with that, uh, obviously it's going to double at the halving. Um, People I think are realizing it's actually really hard to own Bitcoin. I've heard different things, like groups are trying to reach out to miners now to try to secure Bitcoin that is being produced on a daily basis, and they're paying a premium. Would you guys know anything about that, or would you guys be involved on something like that, or how does that all work?
Yeah, so there are like APs, associated parties, that their job is to like source the Bitcoin and then provide it to the ETFs on a daily basis. They're kind of like the agents for
Hmm.
those groups. I did see there was a tweet today actually from the CEO of Hut 8 talking about how they're being contacted by some of those
Hmm.
groups to sell their Bitcoin. And I know there's also like some groups. I know another miner was looking into if they could lend their Bitcoin so that people had what they needed overnight until they could get the amount they needed the next day. And so I think that stuff is going on. It's not something we're directly involved with, but yeah, I mean, these groups need to find Bitcoin somewhere, and there's no better place than, the miners, one, because they have the Bitcoin, but two, because you don't have to worry about compliance issues. Like, the Bitcoin wasn't owned by a Russian terrorist or
Right,
whatever,
right.
because it's untouched kind of virgin Bitcoin.
Yeah. So do you, because I've heard of these other things as well over the past couple of years where like very high net worth individuals are trying to buy huge amounts of Bitcoin and they don't want to go through exchanges.
Yeah,
What is all that, and how does it work, and what is it? Is it all a scam? What is what is all that stuff?
man. I hear about that like probably every 3 months. We get
Yeah.
a something that comes across our desk, like someone's trying to buy 20,000 Bitcoin,
Right.
and like we're gonna help them do it. And it's never ever in my experience legitimate. Like there's
Okay.
always like six people who are like, oh, I'm representing the guy who's representing the fucking guy who knows some like sheik in Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia who was trying. I'm like, so you're telling me like some billionaire in Saudi Arabia is going through 8 random people to try to
Right.
get me to buy Bitcoin for them? Like that doesn't make any sense.
It
Like
reminds me
you
of the
could, or
Nigerian
like some of them
prince
are like, oh, we
email.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then a lot of them are, and it's like everybody in the middle is a pain in the fucking ass because nobody's providing any value. Everyone's just like, yeah, I know the guy and I'm going to take my cut now. And it's just like, none of it is ever real. Like you can, or sometimes it's like, oh, they're willing to pay a premium to buy the Bitcoin. It's like, why?
Why?
You can just be a regular company and you could buy from us as a regular company. You don't have to pay a premium. We sell it at
Yeah.
spot. Like it doesn't make sense. And I think, yeah, I think if you're like a billionaire and you like are trying to hide your identity, like you have a team of lawyers that can set up a couple companies
Right.
where they don't know where the like end who the end person is, but you don't need like 8 random like guys to be doing it for you. So I've never seen any of that be legitimate.
All
Or we had
right.
a guy yesterday actually looking for a loan, and he's like, I've never heard of this guy. He's not anywhere on the internet, and he's like, oh, I got 25,000 Bitcoin. I'm looking to borrow $150 million, and he wouldn't put his video on the camera. And then he also was like, you have to like send us the Bitcoin so we have it as collateral for the loan. He's like, oh, I'm not willing to do that. And I'm like,
Well,
okay, well,
okay.
nobody in the world's willing to lend some stranger like $150 million.
Well,
So yeah, just random shit.
okay, well that answers that. So anybody that's getting these calls from the Nigerian prince or anyone that's looking for Bitcoin, keep that in mind. Um, but yeah, so but going back to, and I'm
But it's
sorry,
like it's so tempting because you're like, even if it's a 1% chance it's real, you're
right?
like, well,
I
that'd
want
be
to check it
cool to
out.
sell 20,000 Bitcoin,
Right, right, right. I'll get a
Yeah,
couple
it's a
bips
wild
on
goose
that.
chase.
So yeah, no, I get it.
Exactly.
But going back to the ETFs, and we haven't talked about this stuff enough on here, and I know that might not be what you guys are dealing with on a daily basis. But what are your thoughts on that? Because you're in the kind of finance market, uh, what are your thoughts on what the ETF is going to do for the price of Bitcoin? Because there's a lot of debate about, you still could see these big, massive drops, which I think you could. I feel like realistically, the floor probably gets risen a little bit because of the ETF being there. I still think, obviously, with a commodity, you're going to see wild swings from time to time. But do you guys feel like, what's your thoughts on how the ETF long term is going to kind of impact the Bitcoin price?
I mean, I think it's a huge deal, both as it's like you took the fire hose of demand and made it this much bigger. Like all this institutional capital can come in. I think we've just seen the beginning of that. Like a lot of the larger allocators are still, I think, sitting on the sidelines. They're not offering, like, Morgan Stanley and UBS. These groups are rumored to be offering this stuff soon, but they're not really offering it. And like so much money from other groups flows through those banks and some other the big banks that it's really just the start of the whole thing in our estimation. I think also you have a different kind of money. Like this isn't like speculative. I'm going to hold for 2
Right.
weeks and then sell if I make 30%. And it's people that aren't, it's wealthier people. And so they're not going to sell at the biggest, like slightest drawdown because it's not going to make them homeless. It's just like a small part of their portfolio. And so I think in every Bitcoin halving cycle, you've seen a dampening of volatility where the highs aren't as high and the lows aren't as low. It's still better than almost any other asset in the world, but it's less than it used to be for Bitcoin. And so I think you'll continue to see that dampening of vol. Even like the big drawdowns we've had so far this cycle have been like 12, 15%, when in the past they could be 40, 50%.
Right.
And that's because even like, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, GBTC was having all these outflows and the other ETFs weren't having massive inflows, but they didn't have negative days. They just stayed about flat or had a slightly positive inflow. And that shows you people aren't panicking at the first sign of trouble. And so I think just structurally, you have new sources of demand that's much more kind of mature capital that isn't going to run away. And then also just the legitimization of it, because we have the US ETFs, we're seeing like Hong Kong's about to introduce them. I saw Australia's introducing them, Germany. And so everyone's, looks at US and goes, okay, I guess this is like
it's okay,
a responsible thing to do. And that's the truth about finance is everybody is a coward. Like everyone is thinking about not how do I make a bunch of money? They're thinking, how do I not lose my job? And for the longest time, Bitcoin's been this way to lose your job. Even if it's up a bunch, if it doesn't go up or you catch it at the wrong time, you look like an idiot. And so everyone's just looking for other people to give you cover. But like if freaking BlackRock's doing it, I can't look that dumb if it goes down,
Yeah. That's kind of how I felt about it too, just from like, man, people are scared to go be the first one to do something. We just needed somebody to pull the trigger. Now that they have, it's kind of like, I think the dam could break and they need to have a lot of inflows. So
there's a little bit of chatter on Twitter. I haven't followed it too much, but I know Barbara was talking about it a little bit, to where play this out over the long period of time. Like, what if these ETFs are controlling too much of the Bitcoin supply to where kind of in an instant they can kind of control that, right? If BlackRock just dumps $50 billion worth of Bitcoin at any given time, like what does that do to the market?
I mean, I guess that's the part that
it's really more like. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that's the part of the debate where people are like, "Oh, it could be bad," because I've heard that too, and
it's just too much power in too few hands. Potentially.
Right. But I also look at it like, why would they want to destroy their own value?
Sure.
Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and it's also like, I mean, BlackRock is the creator of the product, but it's not like they can just sell everyone's Bitcoin whenever they want. It belongs to the shareholders. Like I have some of the BlackRock ETF in my like IRA account. Like BlackRock can't just sell it unless I direct them to. I guess that, there's situations like, the US government nationalized gold in the past and said, you have to give us all your gold. And so I think there's a risk like that. To me seems like the most risky thing. And I don't think it's a huge risk, but the government says this is a threat to financial stability, or they want to have it themselves. And then they direct BlackRock, who already has everybody's money, and says, you can't release this money or something like that. But I don't foresee that happening anytime soon, at least. But I mean, I don't, except because I have this retirement account, I have some ETF, but I prefer to own Bitcoin and not have to worry about any of it.
Right. Me too.
So obviously with the halving coming up, I mean, the halving will have already happened by the time this episode releases. What is we're not holding you to it, what is your price prediction 12 months out?
Oh, yes.
12 months out? I guess I think it'll be higher than it is currently.
Come on, bro.
I don't know about 12 months out. Give us something. I think if you look at the multiplier you've seen in past cycles and how that diminishes each cycle, it's reasonable to think we'd be somewhere between 120 and 170,000 at the peak price. And that's just if it follows that same trajectory. But you also have a lot of, I mean, I don't think just because like the halving occurs, it's not like magically guaranteed the price is going to go up for 15 months or something, especially, the general macro economy is pretty like fragile right now. Like everything's way high, but nobody feels good about it. Inflation isn't going down. We're not going to cut rates as quickly as we thought. And so I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns that you can't look at previous cycles to predict from. And in the same way, there's positive things like just the ETF new demand, like that could move the upside way beyond, 120, 170,000. But I'll definitely start, as a firm, we'll start trading differently when we get up to those levels to protect against downside, I guess, because all you can do is use past statistics is the best predictor. And so that's what we'll use.
Yeah. So you mentioned the ETF for your IRA. So I want to like change all my IRA stuff over. So what did you do on that? I want to know because I'm probably going to do the same thing.
I mean, I just made my contribution. I think the max per year is $7,000. So I just sent 7,000 in and
into the
called my like wealth advisor and said,
into the BlackRock ETF.
Yeah, I bought that. I bought the BlackRock one, but I mean, I think BlackRock or Fidelity or Bitwise are all high quality ones with enough volume that they're pretty much equivalent.
What is the difference between those?
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know shit about ETFs.
So
if I was looking to go and do the same thing, because you talk about quality, what goes into the quality level of a BlackRock versus any of the other ones?
So, I mean, one is just like, these companies are massive companies that have stability. And so you're not worried like they're going to go out of business. I mean, Bitwise is smaller than BlackRock and Fidelity by like 10, 100x or something. But for BlackRock, like, they've been around for a long time. They've done this a long time. And so that's one aspect. Another aspect is the bigger the product, that means there's going to be more liquidity. So if there's a giant crash or a giant rise in the price, you might see some of the smaller ETFs, you might get a lot of slippage on the trade if you want to get in or out because there's just not as many people trading those products. And then also what you'll see is as soon as the SEC approves that there'll be derivatives markets on the ETF. So you can trade options and futures on the BlackRock ETF. And what that allows is for institutions to start trading these things in earnest because they can manage risk in more sophisticated ways once those derivatives emerge. And you'll only really see a liquid derivatives markets in the couple biggest ones. And so a lot of it is just size. Like the bigger in finance, like the bigger you are, the easier it is to get even bigger just because it alleviates a lot of the kind of diligence and risk concerns. I think, one of the big differentiators between Fidelity and the others is Fidelity does self-custody of their Bitcoin, whereas BlackRock and Bitwise both use Coinbase. And so there is like almost all the ETFs use Coinbase except for Fidelity. And so there's some concentration risk where, like you could just, Coinbase could become the new FTX, where if there's an issue at Coinbase, well, the whole market is destroyed because everyone's so dependent upon them. And I think Coinbase is like a legitimate company and that won't happen. But Fidelity, there's something to be said, like Fidelity actually knows how to do this stuff on a tech basis themselves, which I think is reassuring. And then the last thing I'd say is Bitwise, I think, gives 10% of their profits to Bitcoin development. And so there's some, like, if you believe in Bitcoin, maybe there's some reason to go to Bitwise for that reason.
Man.
Are there any other like personal financial products that are kind of Bitcoin related that you are either in or interested in that, people who are listening and me personally, I'm trying to think like, what other things should I be kind of thinking about outside of just direct Bitcoin exposure?
Man,
this is not financial advice from us or Alex. Just do your own research. What other disclaimer things we need to say? Do your own shit, man.
No,
sorry.
I mean, I pretty much I own a bunch of Bitcoin that we trade at my company as Bitcoin directly, and then I own Bitcoin in my IRA, and then pretty much everything else I own is real estate. And my whole career is tied to Bitcoin, and so I don't need
Yeah.
very much more like exposure than that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
hear
makes
you.
sense.
When I was in oil and gas, I'd do the same thing. It's like I work in oil and gas. I'm not buying a ton of freaking stock in oil and gas, but yeah.
So you
no,
guys
I
are
get
also doing you said the
Yeah.
Bitcoin-backed loans?
I would say like I think well, so just to say really quickly, I do think some of the miner stocks, I think like all of the miners are probably undervalued right now just because they've had this drawdown because everyone moved into the ETFs. And I can't, because we work with a bunch of those miners, I can't own the stocks and it becomes like insider trading if I do.
Mhm.
But I think there's some like good buys there. And yeah, to your other question, we do Bitcoin secured loans. So people are, sorry, were you going to say something?
So how did you guys get into that? Was it just something that the clients were asking for? Or is it something that like businesses were asking for?
We saw, I mean, yeah, we have a bunch of clients that are interested in Bitcoin secured loans or have a lot of Bitcoin or looking for things to do with it, including miners and just other, family offices and stuff that have a lot of Bitcoin. And once we saw like Genesis, we used to refer people to Genesis and some of these larger lenders in the past, and then they all went poof, and there's been a huge vacuum in the market, and there's still a ton of demand for loans. Like we're lending out like $50 million a week recently
Wow.
to people looking to borrow. So yeah, like the lending demand didn't go away, and so there's just a lot of opportunity if you can do things compliantly. And I will say, like unlike BlockFi or all these firms that blew up, we don't trade the Bitcoin or re-lend it out or do anything like that. It just sits in cold storage until the loan gets repaid. And so you eliminate a lot of the risks of why all those companies blew up.
Man, I honestly feel like I've learned more on this than I have any of our other shows.
The finance side,
Yeah.
it's where I'm weakest.
Yeah,
I'm not a finance bro.
me neither.
I do own a few vests.
I
but
was gonna
I'm not a
say
finance bro.
I don't even have vests. So is that like a staple for the Bitcoin finance world too? You're gonna get one over here, aren't you?
You gotta have your two
Oh,
prime
man.
vest on, and then you're good to
Alex,
go.
you gotta send me and Jake one, man.
We'll get some over to you.
I'll send you a Firm 21 shirt. It's our legal office that we started. So I'll send you that. You guys gotta send us a vest.
That sounds like a deal.
Wait,
Cool, man. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot.
I have too. This has been really good. Really, really good. Don't go anywhere because I want to ask something when we close, when we end the show. But yeah, this has been really revealing. I like it.
Alex, appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We need to have you come do one in person too. So next time you're in Houston, let us know.